Good morning, Murray Bertram Campus High School students and campus community members. I welcome you to Murray Bertram High School Campus Common Sense Town Hall on youth mental health. Thank you for joining us. We would like to welcome our guest speakers, Jim Steyer, the CEO of Common Sense Media, Dr. Laurie Santos, Yale professor and podcast host, and Frances Hogan, world-famous Facebook whistleblower. We would also like to extend a special welcome and thank you for partnering to coordinate this town hall event to Tally Horowitz, Robbie Torney, and Carla Cosgrove. I hope you enjoy, and thank you again for coming.
This is on. Hi, I'm Jim. Welcome. Really good to see you all. I'm a former New York City high school teacher, so I'm happy to be here. I would have been a very tough teacher for you guys. I just want to tell you that. You will find that out over the course of the next hour. And my day job is I run Common Sense Media, and I'm also a professor at Stanford University. But what we're here to do today is to have a conversation with you all about youth mental health. So you literally have two of the foremost experts in the United States here at your school at Murray B campus today. And let me tell you why they're, I think, going to be great folks for you to talk to and bring your own issues up to. On my left, Frances Haugen. You heard Principal Joyelle refer to her as world-famous Facebook whistleblower. That's actually correct. So Frances is from Iowa. Her parents were teachers. And then she went to Harvard. And then she started working in the tech industry. So she worked at Google, Pinterest, and then Facebook. And a couple of years ago, if you guys were paying attention to the news, you may know this, Frances released a treasure trove of documents that revealed that the people who run Facebook and Instagram, platforms that I imagine you know fairly well, had hidden a lot of information about how those platforms did a lot of really negative things for kids and young people. Everything from body image issues to racist issues to misinformation and disinformation on those platforms. And the people who run Facebook had hidden, and Instagram had hidden that from the public. And then Frances came out and released that document, testified in front of Congress, testified all around the world. And it actually had a huge impact on not just Facebook and Instagram as companies, but actually on the entire tech industry, because it showed that they knew that a lot of their platforms were doing stuff that were really negative for kids, which is what we're going to talk about today, the good and the bad of social media and its impact on you guys. So Frances is now running a nonprofit focused on empowering young people like you guys to speak out and do stuff that'll improve the world for yourself, for your peers, and for other young people around the United States and the world. So welcome, Frances Haugen. Thank you very much. And then next there is Laurie Santos, who is a world-renowned psychology professor at Yale University up in New Haven. And she teaches the most there's many things I could tell you about Dr. Santos, but the thing I would most tell you is she teaches by far the most popular class at Yale University. It's called Happiness. And it's really, and about a quarter of all students at Yale take Laurie's class. And I always say the reason is because they're not that happy and they're actually taking a class to sort of figure out what are the psychological underpinnings of that. So what we want to do today, so let me just tell you a minute on Common Sense. So we are the biggest child advocacy group in the country and the biggest advocacy group focusing on the impact of media and technology on young people. So we put out a lot of research. So for example, right here is a piece of research that we put out last month, which is called How Girls Really Feel About Social Media. It's all about teen girls, how much time teen girls spend on platforms like Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, etc. And it talks about the impact on you guys' lives, for better and for worse. So we do a lot of this stuff, and then we advocate for young people here in New York City and Albany, but most of all in places like Washington, D.C. and California, where I live. I live in San Francisco now. And basically, our job is to speak up for you guys. You have a question? I'm sorry?
Where can you read it? Where can you find it?
Oh, at commonsense.org. At the end, I will actually put that up. I have bad hearing, guys. I'm old, and my hearing isn't very good. But you can find it at www.commonsense.org. And at the end, we'll tell you about a bunch of resources. But what I really want to do is just introduce Lori and then Francis. Let them tell you a little about their work, and then we really want to hear from you. So remember, we're teachers, so if you don't have good questions, we're just going to call on you randomly like I do my Stanford students, and Lori does her Yale students. So we want you guys to listen a little to Lori and Francis, and then we want to have a conversation with you about mental health and your guys' reality, particularly with social media, but all other aspects of your life. So thank you very much. Lori, why don't you start?
Yeah, hi, welcome. Thanks so much for having me. So I teach this class at Yale that's called Psychology and the Good Life. It's all about strategies that we can use to feel a little bit better. And the reason I started teaching the class was that I saw the mental health crisis that was facing young people, right? Because I'm a college professor, I know the college data a little bit better, but right now nationally, more than 40% of college students say that they're too depressed to function most days. More than 60% of college students say that they're overwhelmingly anxious, and more than 1 in 10 has seriously considered suicide in the last year.
Can we take one moment? Okay, imagine everyone on this side of the auditorium every day was showing up at college saying, I am too depressed to function.
Yeah,
Think about
probably
that one.
right down this
Right
line
down
here,
there.
and then it'd go sort of up to like where that laptop is, would be overwhelmingly anxious. And if there's probably about maybe 200 people in the room today, that would mean 20 of you were seriously considering suicide most days, right? This is bad. This is a crisis. And just kind of show of hands, like how many have seen similar kinds of mental health stuff in the campus and the community here? Folks, everybody's being a little, you don't have to be shy around me. I've seen it up close and personal, right?
And I want to be clear. Like, it's hard for you guys to contextualize, like, what's normal, right? Like, you guys live your lives every day. That's normal for you. 20 years ago, this would have been insane.
Yeah.
Right? No one would have accepted this 20 years ago.
And in fact, we have data on this. So those rates of depression have doubled in just the last 9 years, right? And so that was before COVID, and things have obviously gotten worse. And so what we're here to do, and the hope that questions that we'll get is sort of, what can you do about that? Look, the good news is what the science shows is it doesn't have to be that way. There are strategies that you can engage in at the individual level to protect your mental health, to decrease your stress, to kind of deal with your emotions a little bit better. And there's things we can do at the societal level to try to protect you too. And I think that's where Francis comes in, of thinking about like what's going on in society that might be contributing to this problem. Where are some challenges where we need a little bit of a rethink about the pros and cons of the stuff we engage in? And I think that's a nice transition.
How many of you pay for social media? Raise your hand. Anyone subscribe? Maybe a check mark on Twitter Blue? Any Twitter Blue subscribers here? Yeah, we got 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Not anymore. But
not anymore, of course not. Of course not. None of you would do that. No. Guess what? Every single one of you pays for social media. Every single one of you. So the business model of social media is they keep you on there as long as possible so that you will see as many ads as possible. You'll click on stuff or you'll just watch them, and you are the product, right? Every single one of you pays for it. And because these products are completely opaque, right? Like when you open it, if you take your phone, how many of you have had your battery die on your phone? Anyone? Anyone? Yeah, all of us have. A couple years ago, a scandal came out that Apple was letting batteries on phones that were like over 2 years old. They were actually doing things on the phones to make the batteries not work as well, because then you'd replace your phone. And what happened? We caught them because people could check out their phones. We have control over that device. We have control over that product. When it comes to social media, they're making lots and lots of choices to make more money off of you that may not actually be good for your mental health, that might not make you happier. How many of you, I have this problem, so no embarrassment here. How many of you doom scroll late at night? Anyone? Anyone? Yeah. You can talk to my husband. He's very judgy about YouTube. Very judgy. That's not an accident. Yep. It's not an accident. We've known for 20 years that if you make an application a teeny bit slower, teeny bit slower, people use it less. Let's imagine a world where at 10 in the morning, it asks you, when do you want to go to bed tonight? And you said, I want to go to bed at 11. My mom wants me to go to bed at 10. I want to go to bed at 11. And for 2 hours before that, TikTok got a little bit slower. There's a little more lag between each video. They felt like you had to push the video a little harder. Or Instagram got a little bit slower. Around your bedtime, you'd want to go to bed. You wouldn't even notice it. You're just going to get bored. That feature is live on Instagram today if you are stealing content from Instagram. Like if you're downloading it because you're trying to copy all the images, get all the data, they don't take your account down because you just get a new account. But they slow your account down a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more so you can steal less. So if they wanted you to go to bed, or if they wanted you to get to choose to go to bed, they could fix this in 2 weeks, but they choose not to. Today, I want you guys to ask questions about your experience on these social platforms. Like if you've ever had a question, or just talk to us. Like if you feel frustrated or powerless or angry, like it's okay to talk about those things. And we're going to talk about what can be done to change things. How can we begin to together resist? Or how can we in our individual lives reduce the harm that's happening or take care of each other? So I'm very happy to be here with you guys today. And I want you to know we can change and we can push forward.
So let me ask you guys, thank you very much, Frances. And by the way, Frances is a product designer. So some of you all are going to go work at tech companies at some point in your career. You will. And so Frances designs products. So when she talks about how Instagram works, or TikTok works, or YouTube works, that's because she built those products. That's because she actually understands how those algorithms, you all know what an algorithm is, right? That's what drives, I'm sorry? Actually, Frances,
Sure,
why don't you explain an algorithm? Because you guys all, you guys are susceptible to algorithms all day, every day if you're on your phone.
Everyone is. Everyone who touches their phone, everyone who interacts with a product that recommends content is using algorithms. So let's roll back in time to the ancient days of the internet. So this is like 20 years ago, 30 years ago. If we went online and spent time, learning from each other, we had things like bulletin boards. It's kind of like 8chan, right? Like we had places where people would post things, they'd be in chronological order. We'd see something if a person wanted us to see it. Today, when you open your phone, Instagram looks at hundreds of thousands of pieces of content to figure out what it should show you. It says, what are all these different options? And a computer decides what you should focus on instead of people deciding what you should focus on. And the problem with this is that these algorithms aren't optimizing for how happy you are. They're optimizing for how likely you are to engage, or to click, put a comment, whatever. And I'm going to tell you a really quick story, and then I'll hand it back to Jim. A journalist was interviewing me, and he said, hey, I want you to explain something to me. I just had a baby, cute, happy baby boy. We made an Instagram account for the baby because we wanted to share the baby with our family and our friends. That baby account had 5 friends who were all healthy, happy babies. The only thing being posted to any of these accounts was healthy, happy babies. The only thing I clicked on, put comments on, healthy, happy babies. And yet, 10% of his feed was mangled children, right? Kids in the hospital, kids who have had horrible accidents, kids dying of cancer, kids with tubes coming out of them. He's like, how did we get from happy babies to this? And it's because the algorithm said, hey, this guy likes babies. What content are people most likely to dwell on? Just like leave up on their screen and look at. What are people most likely to click on? And it turns out that if you're a father of a new child, children's suffering is something you can't scroll past. That's what's happening to every single one of us every day, and it's invisible because we don't have usually accounts that are so pure. And it's because the algorithms are directing our attention, not people.
And they are going, and by the way, this is true in all aspects of life, not just for y'all, when you're on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Snapchat. Let me ask you a question, and then Lori's going to talk about happiness. How many, put up your hand, how many of you think TikTok is your favorite platform to be on? Put up your hands high so we can see. Okay. How about YouTube? How about Insta? Okay. How about Snapchat? Okay. Interesting.
Anyone have any other favorites?
Any others that we're missing?
Yeah, yell it out.
Ooh,
Twitter.
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 Okay.
Twitter?
Anyone use, yeah.
Reddit's another one.
Okay.
Do we have any Be Real fans? Anyone like Be Real?
Okay.
Okay. Anyone like Be Real? Cool. Anyone? I think it's called Blue Fever. Is that a thing? No. Okay. Good.
Which one were you going to say?
Discord. Ooh,
yeah.
I love Discord.
I
Yeah.
know. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, let's hear from Professor Santos.
Well, I have one other quick question about
Okay,
this.
fine, Laura, you go.
Has anyone ever been on any of these platforms, whether it's TikTok or Discord or Reddit, and you had the moment when you came off that you sort of felt a little gross, like time kind of went by? Show of hands. All right, a lot of folks. And this is a weird puzzle, right? Like, why are we doing something, spending our time on something that kind of makes us feel gross? Yeah. And part of it is these algorithms, right? They're good at drawing us in, but the stuff that draws us in isn't necessarily the stuff that winds up making us feel good afterwards. And this is the kind of thing we want to deal with, right? Like, we want to figure out, okay, how can I get the positives out of these platforms, but not end up with the gross feeling afterwards? That's what we're kind of going for.
So, Lori, why don't you give a 5-minute version of your entire Yale class on happiness?
No, it's actually, so the class is only boring if you don't care about your emotions and your mental health. And my guess is that given the number of hands I kind of saw creeping up about the kinds of things that were happening, like on the ground here on the campus, my guess is it's pretty useful. And so the reason it's useful is that we all kind of go about thinking about our emotions and our happiness wrong. I think we all kind of want to feel good, right? None of us want to feel like crappy. Like, we all want to feel pretty good. The problem is that the world is really tough for that right now, right? There's like the economy's falling apart. There's like climate change. There's like anti-black violence. There's the COVID. There's just everything's really bad, right?
School's stressful.
School is really stressful and hard. Like, academics is really hard. Friendships are like, there's just real stuff, right? And we want to make ourselves feel good, but sometimes we go about it the wrong way. We go after the wrong kinds of stuff. We just mentioned one wrong kind of stuff, right? Which is like, if you're feeling bored, if you're feeling anxious, you might pull out your phone and do something fun.
I do that.
I do that too. But you want to pick the thing that's actually going to build you up. And what we've been talking about is that some of these things actually make you feel worse afterwards, right? And so this is what the class is about. It's like, where do we go wrong when it comes to our mental health? Where does it go wrong? Where are we making it worse, right? Then we talk a little bit about why that is. What are some biases of the mind that get us stuck? One bias is something we were just talking about before, which is that we don't always go for the things that are going to make us feel good. The things we seek out sometimes make us feel worse, right? And we need to kind of understand why that is. But then the class spends a whole bunch of time on okay, what are the kinds of things that we can do to make us feel happy? If you self-report feeling a little bit stressed, a little bit depressed, a little bit anxious, right? Then what are the kinds of things you can engage with that's really going to make you feel better? And the big ones that we go through in class is in real life social connection. It turns out that is uniquely powerful from a psychological perspective for making us feel better.
How many of you? Okay, I want you guys to think about lunchtime. When you go to lunch, do you hang out and talk to your? How many of you use your phone at lunch and just sit and kind of recharge? Do you sit and do that? Anyone?
Yeah.
How many of you intentionally go and eat lunch with your friends and spend that time together? Yeah.
That's great.
Okay, good.
And I bet that one of the cool things about our happiness is we can do our own mini experiments you can hack. I'll challenge some of you who are on your phone, maybe spend a little time talking to other human and then do the hi, how do I feel afterwards, right? It's just a mini experiment to sort of test this. But we also talk about a lot of strategies for kind of dealing with negative emotions, right? One of the things we do badly is that in our heads, we often talk to ourselves in ways that don't help. Imagine you talked out loud to other people the way you talk to yourself in your head. You'd probably get in trouble in school because the things we say to ourselves in our head is we suck, I'm not good enough, I shouldn't be doing this. There's this kind of constant going on in your head of saying mean stuff. We talk in class about strategies you can use to stop that. We talk in class about strategies we can use that when you're in that worry spiral of the test, academics, that thing I said to my friend, all that's going on, just how can you stop it, right? How can you talk to yourself in a way that pulls you away from that anxiety and that worry? And then we talk about strategies that we can use to start thinking about ways that can make the world better, right? One of the amazing things about your generation, one of the things I'm so proud of, is that we're already watching your generation make changes to a lot of the stuff that our generations have screwed up. right? And there's lots of evidence that if you take action, if you are active, if you try to help the world or just help the people around you, that can make you happier too. I think another big misconception we have about happiness is that it's about self-care. How many of you seen this word self-care on like Instagram or like hashtag self-care, right? Turns out if you look at the science, the studies show it's not about self-care in the way we think. It's not like bubble baths and paint your nails or whatever. It's actually doing for others. It's doing for the world. But we get out of that, especially when we're in this kind of anxious headspace. We're all about us. But that's another way our mind traps us. We're not doing more for others. So that's kind of the fast version of the class. And if any of those tips were like, I want to hear more about that, ask me, raise your hand, and I'll be happy to tell you more.
Okay, so we can have both Francis and Lori can tell you a little more about about happiness, about the mental health issues in the United States, but I think it would be really fun to hear from you all with questions that you have about high school life, social media. Does some of the stuff that we're talking about resonate with you? Does it sound like it's a part of reality? So here's what I would ask you to do. Be respectful to the other students and let people put up their hands and ask questions or make comments. But we would love to hear from you. We have plenty more to say, but we would love to hear from you all. And so I would love to just see if people have questions or comments, put up your hands and to talk about some of the stuff. And anything you want to ask about happiness, mental health, how social media works, how the different platforms are designed, what the good and bad aspects of that are, et cetera. Does anybody want to go first? Yeah. And stand up so we can hear you. Thanks. And tell us your name. What's your name? Okay, and what's your question or comment? Can you do it, Principal Joya? That's good, then we can, thanks.
How does other people's work affect mental health and stability?
Can you say one more, sorry? Work affect, how does work affect mental health?
Use the microphone so we can hear you.
Sorry.
Use the mic.
Hold it
close to your
Close
mouth.
to you, yeah.
How does other work affect you on social media, like you're
Remote
in the
work?
same
Remote work.
media field, and it's forcing you to push your limits and stuff to the point where you're breaking yourself?
Remote work, right? Was that the question?
So talk slowly and hold
sorry.
it. Yeah.
How does mental health? How does other people's work affect mental health due to you're trying to match up the standard of other people's work?
Other people's work?
Okay. How does mental health get affected by trying to match up someone else's standard online?
Oh, comparing
sorry.
yourself.
Yeah,
Comparing
good,
yourself.
good.
Great.
Yes.
Perfect.
Good question.
There's lots and lots of work on this, and as you might guess, because you're asking the question, it's not great, right? So we have these minds that are just ready to soak up information. They're really trusting, right? So if you go on Instagram and you see a body that can't possibly be true because it's obviously photoshopped, somewhere in you's thinking like, that's photoshopped, she doesn't really look like that. But part of your brain can't tell that. They're just like, she looks different than me, better than me, and I feel really terrible.
Actually,
right?
can we take one step back further? Okay, so you guys are actually in a really interesting time of life because your brains are changing, right? So when kids go through puberty, they start getting more dopamine and oxytocin receptors. Those are chemicals that make you feel good when people give you compliments, and they're chemicals that make you feel really bad when people criticize you. And if you said the same things to me that you guys say to each other, I'm not gonna feel it as much as you do, right? So like when you feel like your teachers don't understand like what you're going through, they're actually having like a different lived experience than you are. And so when you do a comparison.
Yeah, and so I think when you see these comparisons online, they can't help but affect you. Even if you think they're not, if you think, I'll just watch this video, but I'm not gonna fall for it, your brain can't help but being affected. The problem is that there's also this bias in that whenever we see good things happening to other people, we kind of think they're happening more often than they should be. And whenever we think about the bad things happening to other people, we assume they're not happening as much as they really are. So there's this one study in college students that asked college students, hey, how often do you think the students around you get good grades, go to a fun party, got asked out by somebody they like, all the good things, or bad things, like maybe were you homesick, did you get a bad grade, and so on. But then they ask the kids themselves, well, how often did you go to a fun party? How often did you get a good grade? And so on. So they could match these up, right? They could do this nerdy math thing where they're like, is it the same? And what you find is that we're about 30% off on the good things. In other words, you think good things are happening to other people 30% more than they actually do. So like the other people aren't living these awesome lives that you think. But also, we're even worse off on the negative things. We're about 50% off on the negative things. So if you think, oh, nobody else is like going through what I'm going through, you're just wrong, right? The comparisons that we make are hurting us, and it's not even like they're accurate, they're bad. The problem is that, imagine again back in the pre-internet days, there was no real way to make those comparisons. The only way you could make those comparisons was by talking to somebody at lunch, right? But nowadays, there are comparisons all over. If you do this, if you kind of scroll fast through TikTok, you're probably going to see many, many more comparisons than have ever been available to a human brain in human history. And that can have really negative consequences for our happiness.
Can I ask a question? So, how many of you post on Instagram or TikTok when you have a bad day? Anyone? Yeah. Well,
When you have a bad day.
When you have a really cool day, like you did something really neat, do you post?
How many post
Right?
pictures when you think
Like
you
when-
look
when-
really crappy? Like your really bad hair day,
Yeah.
post when you're crappy? How many
people
post
don't do-
pictures when you think you look
Yeah.
good? Like when it's like a
Like
good
really good
right.
outfit, new outfit, maybe.
Exactly.
Good new haircut. Yeah. So we have a couple kinds of biases. So because we don't post when we have bad days, but we do post when we have good days, we create an artificial world for our peers. And Instagram knew this. They had a thing called like, be your authentic self. Like, how many of you are going to start posting about crappy days just because you saw an ad from Facebook? Like, no one is, right? That's lame. But when we look on Instagram, it's not just that we sit there and say, hey, I know this can't be that good. We see a stream constantly of only a slice of life. And so when you guys feel bad when you look at social media, that's okay. It's not just the creation, it's also the algorithm. The algorithm is going to show those exciting things more than it's going to show boring things.
I was going to take another question. I'm just going to make one comment to the girls in the audience, but I think it's true for boys too. So I'm the parent of 4 kids, right? When we really started at Common Sense Media looking at the behavior of Facebook, in those days it was really Facebook and MySpace. That just shows how old I am. And then it really became Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, what you guys live on. The biggest thing that affected me is we have 2 daughters and two sons, 2 daughters. Our daughters constantly Photoshop their images on the platforms, right? And so as a parent, I would watch my daughter take her photos and completely change them so that she would look perfect and pretty and thin and all these other things. And that is actually so very, very common. And now, that was like 12, 14 years ago that we started that. Now the platforms are that much more sophisticated in forcing you to do that or urging you to do that. And that's the whole comparison thing that your question's about. You're always comparing yourself to other people. And basically, mostly just people put up really good experiences and photoshopped images of themselves.
How many of you guys use filters? Like in the last month, have any of you filtered a photo? Anyone? There's no shame in this.
Good.
Anyone? Yeah.
Okay. Next question.
On this side over there, maybe?
Just a second. I'm coming around with the microphone.
He's coming around. We'll be back.
Awesome. And after this question, the next question needs to come from a young woman, because
Okay.
I don't want just dudes asking questions.
Do you think
your
it's
name?
okay? Oh, my name, I'm Jalen. Do you think it's okay to take a break from social media?
Yeah.
We paid you to ask that question. Did you guys hear the question? Is it okay to take a break from social media?
How many of you ever had like thought you might want to do that? Like after like a bad social media day? Yeah, me too, right? Again, because we feel gross afterwards sometimes. I actually think it's a really good way to see what you use social media for. Because my guess is if you've ever tried to take a break from social media, the first thing that will happen is you'll want to use it. You'll have this motivation to use it. Like, we joke that it's like kind of like a drug, right? Where you're like, oh my gosh, I want to go back to it. But if you can continue that break, if you can commit to it, one thing you often start to learn is why you go to social media. You start to realize like, oh, whenever I kind of feel a little anxious, that's my go-to. Or whenever I'm bored, that's my go-to. you'll start to notice the pattern that you engage with. And I think what that can do is it can make you become a little bit more intentional about when you use social media. And that can be really powerful. So I actually think it's one of the coolest things you can do for a day, 24 hours, for a week. Just try it out. And if getting off all of social media is hard, just try one thing. Just delete the TikTok app for the next 8 hours, right? If TikTok is your thing and you're feeling a little, like gross when you use TikTok, just 8 hours and just notice. No judgment, just notice. It can really teach you interesting things, right?
The thing I always advise people on is, so most of your phones have a thing that lets you see how many hours a day you use each app. And I always like to tell people, the place you start from is just open up that monitor. You can Google it, it'll tell you how to do it. And just ask yourself, is this how you want to spend your life? Right? If we added up those hours over the course of a year, would it be 1,000 hours? If you do 3 hours a day, that's 1,000 hours. Is that what you're going to look back on your life and say, that's how I wanted to spend the days that I was alive? And when we look at the research, you probably will feel bad for maybe even a week after you stop using social media. But when you look 3 months out, the data is very, very different. That on average, people feel substantially better along a number of different dimensions of happiness if they take a pause. And remember, you don't have to do it forever. And even just stepping back, saying, hey, I'm going to give myself a budget every day. I'm only going to do 45 minutes. If we lived in China, you get cut off after 40 minutes. Because the Chinese who run TikTok know it's bad for their kids. But they let kids in the United States use it on average for 89 minutes a day. So contemplate that.
Other questions?
Other question?
Up front, New York.
Hi, I'm Daniel from UA Maker.
Okay.
I wanted to share something. So I've been doing some personal research and learning a lot about AI and social media, and I've learned that basically all social media is run by an AI algorithm that recommends you content. And an AI is only focused on increasing its internal score. That's basically what they do. And if an AI realizes that recommending you content that won't make you happy, but will make you be more interactive, like if, for instance, my dad, he is a very strong leftist, Democrat, and he gets a lot of right-wing propaganda on his Facebook social media page because Facebook knows that he's going to interact badly and he's going to leave angry comments
Correct.
on, whatever post is being made. And
You can't resist it.
he seems to, he tells me like he finds, people on the right who he tries to convince of certain things,
Right.
And he says like they're super stubborn, they, do all these things, but I imagine whatever AI is recommending him this stuff is getting points off of him. And essentially social media is not really for your own enjoyment, it is for an AI program to increase its score.
Yeah.
And as someone who developed that kind of thing, I figured you could maybe recuperate me on that.
Yeah. Could I what?
You could, agree with me or
Yeah.
give me some.
Yeah. So one of the things that is fascinating. So when we think about these products, it feels like they don't change, right? Like in general, yeah, TikTok looks like a stream of videos, but in reality, the product is changing a little bit every single day, and they're always trying. Is there an A version or a B version? And does that version keep you on there a little bit longer? In the case of Facebook, particularly, Facebook for years and years and years, so from 2011 to 2018, the only thing they optimized for, or the core thing they optimized for, was how long could they keep you on your phone. In 2018, they made a shift to something they called meaningful social interactions, which is basically like, can they get you to interact? And within 6 months, political parties on the left and on the right, all across Europe, everywhere from Poland to Spain, said, hey, we know you changed the algorithm. Like it used to be that we could share content on something that, we get it, it's kind of boring, like an agricultural policy. But we can look at the stats and see that people engaged with it. And now if we don't run angry, extreme content, it doesn't get distributed. And so you're totally right. Like the algorithm is feeding stuff to your dad because they know it can provoke him. But I want to remind you all, you can actually change your parents' behavior. So my mom is now a priest, right? So she became a priest when she was 55. And even though she's a priest, she was posting angry, hateful stuff on Facebook. Contemplate that for a moment. Think about what algorithms do to you. And one day, she posted a thing after the election where she said, the Democrats elected 23 scientists to Congress, and the Republicans elected 2 pedophiles. She's a priest. Like, what the heck? What does social media do to us? And I literally wrote in the comments, Mom, I don't think this is constructive. Every single time you post something that I feel is not actually advancing the conversation, I'm going to be the first post, and I'm going to call you out on it. And we literally sat there and had a conversation on, should you do this online? And she stopped. And so I want you all to remember, we can have constructive conversations with our peers, with our parents, saying we get to shape how we talk about the future. And we can change people's behavior by having those calm, peaceful conversations. So I said, oh, young woman was going to ask the next question. So
Yeah.
no, you're,
Come on, we wanted to hear it.
okay, no pressure.
Come on.
I don't want the dudes to dominate the conversation.
Yeah.
Any more
Other questions?
young women who want to ask a question?
Right. We want a question from a.
We're not going to do like 4 dudes in a row.
Right.
I love you all. You're all wonderful.
Okay.
Yeah,
Do it.
come on in. Yeah,
Here,
Yeah.
take the mic.
take the mic.
Thanks.
You're doing great. I've sat in conversations where 20 guys ask questions and no women ask questions.
Okay.
So it's okay. Yeah.
Do you think teen girls are more affected by social media than
Ooh.
like teen boys? And
Yeah.
you mentioned how social media, the algorithm posts like a lot of negativity when you post something positive, but then you mentioned how people don't like post negative days in their lives. I don't know if you want like people to post more positivity or like negativity.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, this is where I can give a plug for, remember before we were saying that there's this report that just came out? The report that just came out looks specifically at teen girls. And it talks about how more than 40% of them report feeling like, that social media is making their lives worse, that they feel addicted to social media. Like whether or not they are addicted, but like they feel like they can't get off it, right? And it's particularly problematic for girls in lots of the ways that we're talking about, because all these comparisons, body image issues, all that stuff come up for girls a lot. But on your other question about the positivity and the negativity, there's really evidence that the stuff we post can affect people. Like the algorithm might not pick it up, but if you make a positive comment, if you post something positive, it actually affects people. There's this thing that scientists call emotional contagion. It just basically means like we catch the emotions of other people. Just like you catch COVID from somebody, you catch other people's emotions. And you know that, right? If you come to school and you're feeling good and your friend is really down or they're angry or they're in a bad mood, you'll kind of feel that a little bit too. But we think we just catch it from other people, but we can catch it from other people's posts. Like even if you're in a great mood, if you just see a bunch of negative TikTok videos, you're gonna walk away feeling more negative.
And for context, folks, Facebook is known since like 2014, 2015, like they published a scientific paper on this, that if they intentionally show you more happy things, you say you're more happy, right? If you show more sad things, they can make people say they feel more depressed.
And the most striking thing about that study is it means Facebook is doing that, at least during the study, but probably all the time. Like TikTok tomorrow could just be like, we just want to make everybody miserable. And they just do a teeny tweak to the algorithm of the stuff you see, and now you're feeling miserable. Like this is the power that these companies have over us without us often realizing it.
So I want to explain Francis said this earlier, but I want to explain, it sort of goes to your question a little about boys versus girls. By the way, let me make one comment about boys versus girls. I'm going to make it mostly as a parent, also head of Common Sense, but I do think that boys and girls, this is very generalized, and it's not necessarily true for each and every one of you. But in general, what you see is girls use social media more for social interaction, for posting about themselves, etc. Boys spend, in general, way more time playing video games and other kinds. They do. The data is really clear about the addictive nature. I'm sure that's true for some of you guys out there. Certainly true for my 2 sons. That boys are more likely to play video games and more likely to spend hours and hours and hours going down the rabbit hole of a video game. And girls using it more socially. That's a very broad
And it has a real effect, right? Like if you spend more time, we talked about before the idea of the social contagion, the comparisons. When we look at the data, the rates of depression and anxiety are growing faster for young women than they are for young men. And they think a big part of that is that in video games, you're not comparing people's lives on the same level. You're still losing out on that positive energy of interacting in person, but you're not tearing yourself down because you don't look as good, your clothes aren't as great, your vacations aren't as fun.
But I'll give you one example that one of the things we talked about, or you guys asked questions about the fact that anger and stuff that pisses you off is something that keeps people on social media. It is, no question. By the way, the question you asked earlier about your dad and his political views and stuff, there's no question that the platforms know that anger keeps you on a platform. So they try to send you stuff, the algorithm sends you stuff that's provocative. Because remember, the business model, I just want to say this, Francis said this at the beginning, but how do they make money? How does Facebook make money? Advertising, okay? How do they, do you remember when Francis said you are the product? The reason they want you on their platform, giving them much information about you as they can, is because then they can target advertisements to you. These are the largest, probably the richest corporations in the history of the world, right? The largest companies in the world now are all tech companies. Most of them, not Apple, but most of the big ones make their money. All the ones you care about, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat.
Facebook makes more profit every year than we spend federally on education. Contemplate that.
But they make their money by selling you to advertisers. Because that's why you get so many ads targeted at you. Yes.
Yeah, what's
question.
up?
But you need a mic.
Or you can project and we'll
Or you
be-
can scream.
Yeah, we'll get you one.
Okay.
Run.
But as we hand the mic, understand how the business works. Because follow the money. That's really a good example in life. Follow the money and you'll understand how things actually really work. Okay.
What's up?
What's up?
Hi. So even if you press like not interested or like I don't want to see this, because they have stuff like TikTok, I know you can press not interested. For Facebook, I don't know about Facebook, but for Instagram you can press not interested and stuff. Does it still pop up, or will stuff that's similar to the topic that you don't care about still pops up?
So this is one of these challenges, right? It's very hard to say these two posts are the same thing. Like it's a task that even humans are really bad at. Humans won't agree. And so it's one of these challenges that the algorithms, like we talked about before, they're just little hill climbers. They have goal functions where they get little credits. You're like, oh, good job, algorithm. They get little rewards the more you engage, but they don't really understand what they're showing you. And so you might say, I don't want this thing, but because the algorithm doesn't quite really understand, oh, this is actually quite similar to all these other things, it's just going to show you the things that are adjacent to it. And so that kind of feedback is good. But we need to have more aggressive tools that give you more rights. And part of why I come and show up at events like this is I want you guys to know that we can work together to demand from the government the right for things like, you should be able to reset your algorithm if you want to without losing your account. Yeah. Right, like when I got sick, so I got so sick I almost died. Like I had to relearn to walk because I was paralyzed beneath my knees. And I started getting shown lots of really depressing stuff on Netflix. Like when I started getting enough better that I was like having a fun life again, I was like, God, Netflix is so depressing. Why is everything on Netflix so dark? And I moved in with some new people, and suddenly all these fun, happy shows were getting shown to me on Netflix because their account wasn't poisoned. Why is it you don't have the right to say, I want to keep my posts, I want to keep my friends, but please start over on the algorithm? And it's because if you did, you'd use the product a little bit less.
And this is like really important, right? There are other domains in which you might get to say, hey, I don't want to see this stuff, right? There's a lot of talk about things like trigger warnings, right? You might, in college these days, you can say, if you're going to talk about something like, bodies or suicidality or abuse or trauma, you have to tell me ahead of time. But the problem is that none of these platforms have that. If anything, you could be on that and you get some TikTok video about, I don't know, like anorexia, trauma, just this stuff. And it's like I didn't want to see that, but like this sort of part of the algorithm. And so you can click like, I don't want to see that anymore. But the problem is because these companies are so opaque, because it took somebody like Francis to like break in and like steal the stuff and make us know about it.
I did not steal it.
Well, not steal it, but the point is like
I gave it to Congress, which is a right that all of you have, just so you know.
Yeah. But the point is like we don't really know what those algorithms are actually doing, right? Another
Hey,
question
hey,
right
Lori,
here.
but once you
Yeah.
ask the question, but I have a question for the audience first.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, go. Go. That's a great question.
So-
Did you all hear? Did you hear
So
what you?
I'll repeat the question. She said, hey, you guys are paying real costs. How many of you have ever been bullied on social media? Anyone? It's okay.
I've seen somebody else get bullied on social media. I know that it's happening.
When you look at the data, a large fraction of young people are bullied, right? And when you look at the drivers for things like suicidal thoughts, often bullying is part of that. And yet, right now, we don't see things like protests in front of Facebook's offices. Like, you guys live in New York. The thing Facebook fears more than anything is people drawing attention to the fact that there are choices they're making, and those choices are hurting people. If you had another product, like a consumer product that was poisoning people, there would be protests outside that office. Beyond that, just telling the truth, saying, hey, this is happening to me, like that is a way that actually changes people's perceptions of how products work.
Can I'll give two examples how I think, and then we'll call on the student. I'll give you two examples how I think you all could make a
Call
big
senators.
difference. The first thing is this. Until 2018, there was no major privacy law in the United States. No major privacy law protecting your data, your information, your personal privacy. Now, there is one now. Do you know where it was passed? Washington, D.C.? No. Where? California, where the companies are all headquartered. And we passed it. We wrote it and passed it at Common Sense Media over the objections of Facebook, Google, YouTube, Instagram, etc. They all opposed the law. What it does, it protects your data. And it's essentially, even though you live in New York, the California law protects you. So one of the things that we did is we had a bunch of young people come to Sacramento, that's the capital of California, like Albany's the capital of New York State, and they went and talked to the legislators about it. So right now we have a bill in California. Again, Washington has blown this. The people at the federal level have really not represented you or me or anybody on these issues since Mark Zuckerberg was in preschool. They haven't passed a law about privacy at the federal level in a year. Now we have a law in California that's up for vote right now that would hold social media platforms like YouTube, TikTok, Insta, etc., liable for the harms that you cause. And you would be able to bring a case against them if you feel that your mental health had been affected or if you feel that it had harmed your life. Now you're going to have to prove that, but the truth is, when that law passes this year, which I think it will dramatically change the behavior of the platforms and some of the stuff that Francis and Lori are telling you. Because it will give you the right to hold them accountable, basically, the platforms, for the damage they've done to you. So what you could do about that is, in one of your classes, and you're a guidance counselor, but it could be in any of your classes, right? We will give you information. You asked me earlier, will I give you access to this report and stuff? Sure we will. But we'll also tell you who you could write and talk to. But when I go to talk to politicians, whether it's in Washington like Francis did, or in Sacramento, or in Europe, because Europe has regulated the tech companies much more than the United States has, we bring young people like you. So what we ought to think about is having you guys go to people here in New York City, go to your mayor, right? Or go to the governor and talk to them about why you would like this regulated here in New York. That your voice is more powerful to politicians if you say it loud, say it clearly and articulately than mine is. Seriously.
And I think it's not just politicians, right? Like, one of the things that your generation is great at is using these tools, right?
Yeah.
You all can come up with hashtags, hashtag TikTok telling me the truth, like hashtag, whatever you come up with, right? But make that go viral, right? This is something that your generation is really good at. Make it go viral at your school, on this campus. Make it go viral in the community. If you start pushing and demanding action and demanding that they fix this, like, you're their main you're their main product, right? So they have to make sure that you're kind of on board. And so really taking local action can be incredibly powerful in these domains.
And I want to be clear, like, it feels overwhelming right now, or it feels like we feel powerless because it's a new technology, right? Every single time we've invented a new communication technology, like social media is like the telegraph. It's like newspapers. It's like radio. It's like film. Every time we invented one of these new technologies, it was incredibly disruptive. Like, we fought wars. Like, think of battleships attacking people. We fought wars over misinformation in newspapers, right? Things like the dictators that rose in before World War II, they rose because of things like radio, because for the first time you could hear your leader's voice. You are living in the moment of change. And the people who are going to change things are you.
Yep.
And we're going to figure out how do we live with these technologies, because we've done it every single time before.
So here's what I would tell you. Next question. Yep.
Going back on the topic of happiness, do you have any advice or alternatives to people who have a hard time finding what makes them happy? Because so many people say, when you're down in the dumps and people say, do what makes you happy, there's also so many people who have different types of like happiness, like any alternatives, because so many people like, this makes me happy and this makes me happy. Is there any advice or alternatives other than social media that can help make people feel a lot happier?
Yeah, it's a great question.
That's a great question.
Yeah, one thing I guess a couple things. One is, I think we need to make sure we're getting happiness right. Sometimes when we talk about happiness, we think it's like that happy emoji all the time. Like, I'm just smiling, there's no negativity, there's no anxiety, no fear, no anger, whatever. We need to remember that negative emotions are what's called normative. They're normal. Like, you're supposed to be mad sometimes. You're supposed to be frustrated sometimes. You're supposed to be sad sometimes. And so I think when we think about making people happier, we need to not go into, like, fall into toxic positivity, where it's like, pretend everything's perfect, happy all the time, right? There's going to be ups and downs, and that's the way it's supposed to be. That's healthy. Like, true mental health has a little bit of this, right? But the key is that you also need to figure out what are the kinds of things that bring you positive emotion, joy, humor, whatever. And that really requires noticing. One of the things I hear a lot from young people is like, I don't even know what I like anymore. Like, there's so much academic pressure on all of you to be kind of getting perfect grades and so on, thinking about the next step, whether it's college or whatever. Those kinds of pressures mean you're not kind of just paying attention to the stuff that naturally gives you joy. And this is where I think for a lot of this, and this is true with social media too, really there's an emphasis on what you might call mindfulness, just kind of paying attention to what's going on. Like, like set a little timer when you're on TikTok to ding, and then have a moment to say, how am I feeling after that? Am I feeling gross? Was that funny? Did that give me joy? Like, do the same thing as you engage in different activities, and that can be the way you do it. The way you find out kind of what is the thing that makes you happy is to start noticing in yourself. And I think we have a lot of structures that make that hard. It doesn't give you much time to do that, but that's the way you figure it out.
I would strongly recommend make a little note in your phone. It's like, open your note app, and every day at the end of the day, write down 5 things that made you happy that day. Because if you, and set a timer, set an alarm on your phone for 9 p.m., like before you go to bed, saying, I'm going to sit down and think of 5 things that made me happy today. Because all day, you'll pay a little bit more attention. You'll say, when did I feel good? Because I need to write down 5 things today, and I want them to have detail. And what's crazy about that is you will begin to notice the moments in your life that make you happy. And then you can spend more time doing those things. And they can be really, really simple. They can be things like your teacher did a good job, and you said, hey, you did a good job today. And you will watch their face light up, because teachers get told they're like horrible so much. And you'll be like, oh my God, that felt really good. Like, I made another person smile. You're gonna figure out these little things in your life that bring you joy, and then you can spend more time doing them.
So, hey, Principal Joyelle, I was going to tell you, so Professor Santos's class at Yale on happiness, there is a high school version now of Laurie Santos's class. You should tell it. So you guys, I think.
Yeah. So it's
you can actually take Professor Santos's class, the Yale course, now in high school, but you should explain how, Laurie.
Yeah, so it's called The Science of Wellbeing for Teens, and we just redid the class for high school students. Because of course, you all have stresses and challenges that are similar to college students, but a little bit different, right? A lot of yours have to do kind of with family and social engagements that happen in high school, and a lot of the academic pressures that come with what's gonna happen after high school and so on. And so we filmed a new version of the class in front of a group of high school students. We actually did it with low-income students in the New Haven area who all came in. We sat down, I presented my stuff, and then they were great because they grilled me on it. They were like, I don't think that's what's going on, and we just had these interesting conversations. And so it's basically kind of just like a fun conversation. There's short videos that are on this one platform called Coursera.org, but also on YouTube. You can kind of just watch them like a YouTube stream of videos. I have both teenagers and families that watch it together, almost like a Netflix show. Like, this is what we're gonna watch on TV. We're just gonna see 6 hours of this content, and you can kind of binge it. But it provides really great, kind of specific strategies like some of the stuff that we've been talking about here, but just practices you can engage in. And if there are teachers out there that want the content and want to do it in a more academic setting, just let me know and I'm happy to share it. Cool.
So we're going to wrap up in a minute. I just want to make a couple of comments. Number one, now I'm just being...
Can we do one last question?
We have one more question or one more comment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why don't we do that, and then we're going to wrap up. So this is last question. Okay,
Two more.
Hold
on.
on on your schedule. Okay. All right, stand up. Though,
Sit.
so we can hear you. Stand up, please.
And speak slowly because the mics are a little muddled. Yeah.
Do you think social media increases the percentage of suicide?
Yeah. So what we know is the number of suicides have gone up a lot. And we know and in addition, suicidality, which is you're thinking about suicide, you're wondering about it, you're considering it, that's gone up a lot. And if you plot the graph of how much that's gone up, and you plot how many people are using Facebook or Insta or TikTok, they're all kind of going up the same way. There's much better documented evidence that Facebook increases things like depression and anxiety. And we know that if you're depressed, if you're feeling anxious, if you're going through other bad mental health issues, you can kind of get to suicide too. And so, yeah, the relationship seems to be there. And I really worry that some of the newest platforms that you all engage with make this relationship even worse. Because if you're feeling bad, if you're not, feeling great, and you go on TikTok, what are the kinds of content you're going to be gravitating towards? Maybe videos about depression, maybe videos about other individuals who consider suicide, right? There's content that algorithm is gonna take you down a hole and bring you to worse and worse stuff over time. And so there does seem to be a relationship, and I worry that relationship is only gonna get worse.
And one of the things that I'm particularly concerned about is many of you use Instagram in English. Many of you don't use Instagram in English, right? And right now, the different languages are not treated the same on the platform.
Correct.
So part of my family is Norwegian. You can tell by the tallness and the blondness. But there's some journalists in Norway who found a suicide network. This is 600 accounts that glorified suicide. They put up pictures like a black and white photo of train tracks and a thing saying today is a great day to die. And they told Instagram about it. They printed out 1,000 posts from this cluster and gave them to Facebook and said, hey, here's 1,000 posts. And they said, we can't do anything with this. You have to report them. So they reported 1,000 posts glorifying suicide, and they got left up for over 6 months. And that's because Norwegian was not considered an important enough language. And so when we talk about what is the experience of these platforms, it's going to be different in English than it is in other languages because they don't fight to keep people safe equally in all languages.
And let me just say this.
And a number of girls died in that cluster. It was 12 girls died in that cluster.
And by the way, so two things. One, you have a voice in this. I just will say that over and over again. You have a voice. You are the biggest users of these platforms, whether it's TikTok, Insta, YouTube, whatever. You are the biggest users. If you speak up about it, it will have an impact. Yeah. It will have a big impact. The second thing I will tell you is, part of our campaign, we're running this session with you guys today is part of a much broader campaign we're doing around the United States. We're doing one of these in LA next week at the University of Southern California, where we're bringing the Surgeon General of the United States. So how many of you know the little warning that's on a cigarette package? It says older people know it because these guys don't smoke. They certainly don't smoke cigarettes as much as your generation did. There's a label, as a warning label on all cigarettes, guys, that says the Surgeon General has said that smoking is hazardous to your health, okay? We are trying to get the Surgeon General of the United States to now create a warning label that will be on all of the platforms that we're talking about that says social media can be hazardous to your health.
So with cigarettes,
because it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. You could write the Surgeon General, who's a great guy, by the way. His name is Dr. Vivek Murthy, and we will give Principal Joel and others his address. If young people wrote him and said, you should do this, he is a great guy. He might do it, and it would be transformational if that happened.
Here's a fun fact. So only 1 in 10 people who smoke, like cigarettes, get cancer, right? It's like 1 in 10, many, many decades down the line. Facebook's executives themselves showed up before the Senate and said, 4 out of 5 kids are fine on Instagram. Think about that for a moment. If 4 out of 5 are okay, 1 out of 5, 20% are not okay. And they got up there and said that proudly. They're like, 4 out of 5 are fine. Think about that for a sec.
Okay.
One
On
last
that
question.
bright note, no. Do you want one more question? Okay.
Sure.
Okay? Question or comment, and then we got to let you guys go back to
Question,
class.
are you considering doing online summer classes or either virtually or in person for happiness?
Yeah, so the class that's on Coursera.org exists. You can enroll anytime, so it's a great thing to take over the summer. It's basically 6 hours of content for the class, and there are little quizzes and stuff. You can really take it as a class, or if you're like, I'm stressed, the last thing I want is another class, you could just watch the videos on YouTube and learn the same way. But yeah, all the content is on the Science of Wellbeing for Teens on Coursera.org. If you Google Yale Happiness Class Teenagers, you will find it.
So, we will give to Principal Joyelle, should it be you, we will give information on Professor Santos's class, all sorts of background on what Francis did as a whistleblower on Facebook and Instagram and how that changed the entire tech industry, and we will give you all the resources that you want from Common Sense Media, whether it's about how girls really feel about social media or about any kind of the issues we've been talking about today. All right, good to see you guys. Thank you for spending the day with us.